I have some stuff to share with you today, exploring prophecy, and I hope it will be a blessing. One of the things that I discovered about prophecy is that prophecy is fulfilling every day. Many times we are kind of stuck on the history of what has happened before, but what is happening around us right now that relates to prophecy that we are not seeing? That's a very good question, I think, that we could ask. And I will share a couple of nuggets with you during my presentation this evening. Maybe you have known what I'm going to share, maybe not. In any event, hope it will be a blessing. Everyone that is on this meeting currently pretty much knows who I am. Jerome Gale, live in Tennessee. I'm married. I have 3 girls. I work in the IT industry, and I also runs a nonprofit organization called In My Backyard. We have worked with Upendo tirelessly over the years on a lot of different projects. And I thank the Lord that that relationship is still holding up today by his grace. Okay. So last time I gave some tips how to study the Bible. I'll go over them quickly. Determine the layout or organization, how the book is, organized, and try to figure out what the theme is. When you're studying God's word, and for example, if you're in a chapter, look at words that tend to repeat. It means that something important, or God is trying to say something very important, or scenarios. Another very important thing to do when you are studying is to also look at the cultural context. Never use a modern day context to interpret God's word. And I see this a lot of times where, our minds and our mindset, we're trying to use it to frame what happened back then. It's very good to find out the type of culture, the type of setting that was happening when those inspired words were written. Hence, I always encourage people to study Bible history. Very, very important. Okay, get a concordance and that will help you to get other related texts. You should not base the premise of your understanding on one text. And try not to use the root word, either Hebrew or Greek, to determine the meaning of a word in any passage. Many times I hear presenters and they will say the root word. So for example, I gave you an example the last time. If you were here last week, I said, given an example, I'm running for office. I'm running away from the bear. And then they go to the root word for running, which is run. And they use that to translate the actual meaning of that passage or that word. That's a very, very bad practice. Look at the context, look what's in front of you, and try to understand. If you're really serious about studying God's word, you can get very good resources like the Logos Bible software that can actually help a lot. Okay. And so we're talking about prophecy. What is prophecy? One of my favorite dictionaries that I use is the Vine's definition of prophecy here. It's got 2-part: foretell, that's to give counsel, and foretelling, that's the future, right? This evening, we're going to be looking at primarily foretelling, right? Then 1 Peter 19-21, it tells us that we have a more sure word of prophecy, whereunto we do well that we take heed as unto a light that shineth in a dark place until the day dawn, and the day star arise in our hearts. Okay, we also established last time that Daniel is divided primarily in 2 parts. First 6 chapters gives us the history, and then 7-12 are all apocalyptic literature. Okay, again, back to my previous point where I said understanding the layout of the book is really, really critical. And so if we look at the structure of Daniel, Oh, there's an important slide that I left out. We will see that Daniel chapters 2, Daniel chapters 7, Daniel chapters 8 and 9 are basically repeating themselves, adding on additional materials. So for example, Daniel chapters 2, the king has a dream, he sees a statue. Nebuchadnezzar was accustomed to worshiping idols, so God gave him a dream using a representation that he was accustomed to. Daniel chapter 7 has got the same thing, but here God uses animals to to represent a similar thing in Daniel chapters 2, with, for example, additional information like persecution of the saints, 1260 years, and so on, and the rise of the little horn. We also established that it was Western Rome that fell, because we tend to say, Rome fell, but it was the Western part that actually fell, that broke into 10 kingdoms. Okay. In terms of another encouragement that I give to you all, am I running the right slide? I hope so. The book of Revelation, again, this is divided in two halves once you establish that. And you see here, I gave you a little example. For example, red matches red. We have the historical, we have the future. We see the seven churches. In the historical, going through issues, and then we see them being delivered. Okay. So I'm going to delve into, I'm going to delve into a little present truth. So Daniel chapters 2:45 says that after the kingdom was divided up, after Rome became divided into 10 kingdoms, they would not unite again, correct? Yes? And the text is there on the screen, referring to that. So can anyone tell me, in light of what I asked earlier, is prophecy being fulfilled? Is this still happening today? You guys might be aware that they have always been trying to unite Western Europe. Can anyone tell me, if you know from the top of your head very quickly, what is the latest episode that went down in terms of trying to bring Europe together and it didn't fail? And it failed, sorry. Anyone knows here? Does anyone know? You can unmute quickly.
Elder Gail.
Yes.
Yes, we do know the effort that was done that put Europe together, and that I don't know the proper terminology and word that have been used and it brought about the Euro, the European Union, I think it's called, and then recently last couple of years we had the Brexit, where Great Britain exited from that consortium, so to speak.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Very, very good. So Brexit was the latest, but what about Brexit that triggered, contrary to what you might have heard on the news? This is very, very important to know. So I'm going to go slightly in a little direction for a few minutes, if you allow me, and I'm going to share a few things with you in terms of what's happening.
And the reason. Is it that new currency that a few countries came up with? Is that what you're talking about?
No. I'm going to share with you, plus my experience of living in Europe also. No, it's not the new currency that caused it. They're not telling you on the news because it's a world, it's kind of like an embarrassment, but it's out there. You can go Google and you will find it out, okay? So the reason why Brexit failed was because of discrimination, okay? So primarily against the Muslims, okay? So this is a headline in the British tabloid, or One, right? Remember, before they started the union, if you flew to England with a visa and you wanted to go to France, you had to apply for a visa to go to France, any other country in Europe. You could not go with a single visa. So they started to open the borders with the attempted reunion. And so now you did not need more than one visa to go to Europe. If you had an American passport, you could go any country in Europe without a visa, with a single visa. So what happened was that England started experiencing a high influx of Muslims. Okay. Now I live in the country, so I know exactly how it goes. If you go to England right now at noon in London capital, if you go to Birmingham, it's bumper to bumper because they're going to the mosque to pray. Now, a lot of Europeans, primarily British, discriminate a lot. They don't like the Muslims. So the Muslims didn't want the European Union to break up because it was, easy for them to get into England. But diehard British nationals wanted it to collapse because they could not deal with a lot of Muslims coming into their country. So if you go to, there are different sources of reference here that you can go and you can look at and you can read for yourself, and you will see at the heart of it was the influx primarily of Muslims, other minorities, but primarily Muslims that actually influenced this. And it's also in Wikipedia, okay? Now, this is very, very important to know. I'm going somewhere with this, right? So Daniel chapters 2, verse 45, they said they shall never unite again, right? So here in Brexit, God used the Muslims to fulfill his prophecy, because the Muslims were at the heart of this whole thing, right? If you have been to England and you lived there long enough, you will know about prejudice and racism in that country a lot, okay? Now, what is Islam? I'm going somewhere with this, so please don't think I'm going off tangent. We're going to get somewhere with this. What kind of influence does Islam have in Christianity? Is it only to do with Brexit? Let me share a little bit of history with you here, just in case you may not know. So I mentioned that one just now. Kingdoms of Europe will never unite. Europe has tried to unite Europe, but God failed. Charlemagne killed 10 million Europeans in an attempt to unite Europe, but was not able to. Napoleon, and so on and so on. And so now the latest effort failed, with one of its primary reasons being the increasing weight of the influx of the Muslim population in Europe. That was actually what caused it to fail, right? So we also looked in the Bible throughout the ages, and we see the book of Isaiah stating that great caravans will come from Sheba, from Midian, and it was Ishmael's descendants tied to the Muslims, which brought gifts to the baby Jesus, as foretold in the scriptures from the east, Isaiah 60 verses 60. Now, I'm not going off, I'm getting somewhere with this, okay? So just bear with me for a minute, okay? So the Reformation, as you guys might know, at the start of the Reformation in the 1500s, when the Bible started to become public and Protestants were protesting the Catholic Church with its military and economic might, attempted to crush the Reformation, and almost succeeded, as the Protestants or reformers were poor and weak. All they had was the Bible. While the Catholic Church contemplated crushing the Reformation, they realized they had a major problem on their hands, found through the Ottoman Empire, which had established itself as a formidable foe. This back and forth between the Roman Church and the Ottoman Empire went on for 460 years. Thus, the Reformation survived. So why is this important, right? Why is this important? We're going somewhere with this. I'm going to show you from God's word. I'm not going off. I gave you about Brexit, but I'm giving you a little bit of history because I could give a lot more, but just in the interest of time, I'll just share, just a few more nuggets. So let's go back to the Bible. Why Islam has been used throughout the ages. I told you about the birth of Christ. They came on caravans from the east. If you remember, Ishmael, when he left Abraham, he went to the east, right? Contrary to what they tell you when you go to Israel, that Mount Sinai is in Israel. It's not. It's in the east. It's in Arabia, Eastern Arabia. That's where it is. You go there, you can see the black smoke at the foot of the mountain from the time when God came down and gave the commandments to Moses and so on. You guys know the story, okay? So let's go to the Bible. So these are the generations, the firstborn of Ishmael, Nebaioth, then Kedar, and Adbeel, and Misbam. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that, with those texts. I'm going somewhere with this again. The multitude of camels shall cover your land. The dromedaries of Midian and Ephah, all these from Sheba shall come. They shall bring gold and incense, and they shall proclaim the praises of the Lord, right? We established that, taking gifts to baby Jesus, right? Now I'm going to the Adventist commentary here. Kedar and Nebaioth, which we established who was Email's sons, settled in the Arabian desert, Genesis 25:13. The people of the regions were noted for their cattle and camels, Judges 6 verses 5. Okay, so the Adventist commentary here alludes to Ishmael's son, descendants from which the Muslims came. Okay, now I'm kind of rushing, but I'm going to share something with you. Why am I going here? And I want you all to be proud of yourself as Seventh-day Adventists. If you don't have a Bible, not the electronic one, a book Bible, please buy yourself one and say, thank you so much. Because I'm going to share some stuff with you. Then we're going to get back into Daniel chapters 8, right? But we're talking about prophecy here, okay? So you might have heard a lot about Muslims and, the conflict between Christians. What most people don't know, or what most Christians may not know, 99% of Muslims have never read the Quran. They have never read the Quran. Do you know that? Muslims, when they go to the mosque, they listen to what their mullahs tell them, and they recite all that stuff in I can't remember the name of the language, which they themselves don't even understand. They are told that if they are late, their God will not be there to answer their prayers. And so they have never read the Quran. And I'm getting at something here because you guys may not know this. A lot of Muslims are now waking up and they're coming over into Christianity, okay, by the boatload. So we too are kind of guilty because according to NAD, 40% of Christians, Seventh-day Adventists, we don't read the Bible either, okay? But I'm going to share something from the Quran with you, which should make you feel very, very proud as a Seventh-day Adventist, okay? So in the Quran, here it is. God is speaking to Elijah Muhammad. He says, if you are in doubt about what we have revealed to you, ask those who read the book before you. The truth has come to you from your Lord. Therefore, don't be a doubter, right? Nor shall you be one who rejects the signs of Allah, for then you shall be lost. And then when you read further down, the books that they're referring to are the Torah, Psalms, and the Gospels. This is actually in the Quran. You can go pull it up. I'm not making this up. Most of them don't know that this is in their book. So, by the way, there is a clandestine operation in the Adventist Church that is using just this passage alone and others to show Muslims who have never read it. And so they are coming over by the boatload. Millions of Muslims are coming over now into Christianity, but it's kind of low key because they can't afford to make their leaders know because of the backlash, but it's happening. If you go on YouTube, you'll see a lot of churches that are, a lot of Muslims who are coming over into the Christian faith. So what is the problem? Why it has taken so long? Most Muslims see Christians as hypocrites. A lot of religions, they smoke and they drink and they eat pork. Muslims know that in the Bible, you should not eat pork. However, Muslims do not know that there's a unique set of people called Seventh-day Adventists who don't practice those things. And this is a lot of research. My mentor, who is Iranian, said then shared with me a lot of this insight. They don't know that there's a unique group, right? So when you even read the Quran, you will see that it refers to a unique people who don't bow to idols and so on and so on, right? Remember, most of them, they see Christians through the eyes of mainly the Catholic Church, and they believe that they drink and they smoke and they do a lot of different things, right? But here in the Quran, it's pointing to God's Bible, and I could show you a lot more, but again, in the interest of time, I will keep it short. So why is this very, very important? Why is this very, very important? So we are people of prophecy. We are very unique. And so we have a message. We're not just here to understand prophecy and, keep it to ourselves. Most times when we share this text, I've heard it many times talk about, and I have other sheep that are not of this fold, I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice, right? Many times we're of the impression that it's people who are just not Sabbath keepers. But if you understand the gist of what I just told you, you'll also notice that it's referring to Muslims. They are searching at the moment because they see a lot of the radical stuff that is going on in their religion, and they don't like it, but they are very confused, a lot of them, and they don't know what to do. These are heavy researches that I have done and insight from within the Muslim community that I've also been told, right? So the sheep, we need to go out. They need to hear more about us. We need to be visible, right? So you guys might have heard about the 1040 window. I'm pretty sure you guys have. And everyone here is aware of the refugee crisis. The 1040 window is that location on the map in terms of latitude and the different measurements. I can't remember, I can't articulate it right now, but this is where 2/3 of the world's population live. They have never heard about God. Most have never heard about Jesus, right? A lot of them are Muslims, right? And so when you speak to a lot of Adventists in terms of, go to those countries, like Afghanistan, that's in the 1040 window, North Korea and others, a whole list of countries are in the 1040 window. We oftentimes say that we are scared to go because we are fearful of being kidnapped or being harmed, right? So this is what, again, in terms of prophecy, look around, don't zoom in too much into the political thing because you're going to miss the whole point here. This is what I believe personally, that God has allowed the refugees from those 1040 windows to come to the United States of America, right? I have met a lot. Dr. Paul, thank you for taking me to the homes of many of these people. Some are Christians, some are Muslims, right? And they're from a lot of countries. Like I said, Afghanistan, North Korea, Algeria, a lot of countries. And so now God has allowed them to come to the United States. There's no more excuse for us to share this precious truth that we have. And so I hyphenated here his other sheep, John 10:16. God is allowing these situations to come. So for example, even right now at the moment, you might have heard about there is an issue down by the border. And some estimates say between 4 million, 15 million. Many Americans are concerned this is going to affect me economically. But I believe with all my heart that God is giving us an opportunity for us to minister because we refuse to go. So he's now taking it to us. And I challenge you as part of your ministry, when you tell others about Christ, not just those who worship on Sunday, because the Bible doesn't support that, find the Muslims and talk to them and get more information and reach out to them. A lot of them are searching. God has placed them in our path and they are searching for God's truth, and you can be a witness to them. So this text, John 10:16, is referring to those other sheep. They're coming to the United States in the form of refugees. They're crossing our borders, plus those who are also here before, who are natives of this country, who have been worshiping on a day contrary to what God commandments teaches us. Now, before I go, I have half an hour to wrap up my presentation. I kind of did this very quickly. Are there any questions about what I just mentioned? I'll be moving into Daniel chapters 8 next.
Well, Elder Gail, I do not have a question. I just want to let you know that I do appreciate the points that you made about how how they have impacted politics and how they have impacted the life of Christianity in a few slides before.
Okay, yes. And let me just say this. I have found myself in Walmart where I saw a Muslim from Syria being abused, and I went up to her and I said, Assalamu alaikum, because she was not fluent in English. And she almost hit the roof that she found someone that could just relate to her. She was literally red in the face because she was abused by the staff. And after I spoke to her, her countenance actually changed. So God is bringing the 1040 window into our backyards, in my backyard ministry. What are we going to do about it? They need to know these are the other sheep. Don't forget, Ishmael was blessed too, right? The angels blessed him, right? The population of the Muslim community is over 1.4 billion, right? So if you go on YouTube and you look, you'll see snippets, but it's actually more. They are fearful, who are trying to find, they're turning away from Islam and they're coming into Christianity. Remember, Abraham had 2 sons, and so they were divided. One represent the Hebrew, and the other one, gosh, whatever the terminology. But these 2 sons, Ishmael, right, and Isaac, they have got very, very profound impact on Christianity, and they both were blessed, right? And I could share with you other examples of how they have been used in the past throughout different periods of Christianity where they have impacted, where they have been used. So, just thought I'd share that. Okay, now we're going to move on to Daniel chapters 8 and revision. We established last week that Daniel chapter 7, from verses 1 through 16, deals with the dream. Daniel chapter 7, 17 through 28, the explanation from the angel. In Daniel chapters 8, the dream begins from verse 1 until 16 through 16. And I think there's a typo on my part there. Verses 20 through 27, a partial explanation is given by Gabriel. The 2300 day is not fully explained until years later in chapters 9. Okay, so Daniel chapter 7, Daniel chapters 8, here are some comparisons. Now, if you look on the right side where I say that it says Daniel chapters 8, and we see the comparisons, you'll notice that verse 14, it says Kippur, right? So does anyone know what this is? Does anyone know what Kippur is? Would anyone like to share? Do you know what Kippur is? Okay.
No.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think I know, but I can't remember exactly what it is right now. But
I see
is it a holiday? Is it a holiday? Is it
no, I'm going to explain. I see someone, his microphone is open. JNYAGW. Okay, I don't know who that is. Would you like to say something?
That's Pastor Joseph.
Pastor Joseph. Okay.
I think it has to do with the sacrificial system, I think.
Yes, it is. So what happened? Everyone knows that we have the typical and we have the anti-type, right? So once per year, the month of Tishrei, around September, October, what happened was that we had the Day of Atonement, right? Yes, once per year. And so when Christ came and he died, we know what happened in the temple. It rent in twain, and there was no more need for us to, have those kind of practices on the Day of Atonement. However, the Jews still practice some of those religious festivities related to the Day of Atonement, and it is called Kippur. Okay, as Christians, we don't celebrate that because we know that Christ, the antitypical, came. Remember, even when Christ was being led through the courts and whatnot, and he was next door to some of these people before he died, they were just ignoring him. They were just keen to do their rituals. Even when after he died on the cross, they were still continuing some of the rituals that were practiced before in the typical system. Okay. All right. So this is a summary of Daniel chapters 2, Daniel chapters 7, Daniel chapters 8. God dreams to Nebuchadnezzar using a statue. That is what he was accustomed to. And God is so great. He speaks to us in languages that we can understand. So if God had showed Nebuchadnezzar the representation of the earth using those symbolisms in Daniel chapter 7, the only one that maybe he could understand maybe would be the first one to do with Babylon. But God used a statue that he could relate to. And we know what happened. He went and he built one of gold. Daniel chapter 7, we see what happens there. Daniel has got a historical breakdown of the world using different symbolic representations. We see the bear on one side, Medo Persia. One side was weaker, one side was stronger. The 3 ribs in its mouth symbolized 3 kingdoms that were actually defeated. Now, Daniel chapter 7 again is more or less history, focus on history, the historical aspect. Yes, it touches on the 42 months or 1260-day persecution. Daniel chapters 8, however, takes on more of the sanctuary kind of tone. Hence those animals, the ram and the he-goat, which were part of the symbolism, or part of the animals that were used in the sacrificial system here, then is what is used in Daniel chapters 8, because again, the emphasis had to do with the sanctuary. 2,300 days of sanctuary shall be cleansed. Now, fair enough, we know the angels did not give the full explanation, but that is the whole introduction of the cleansing of the sanctuary, followed by God's executive judgment. Okay, so I'm going to go through, see if I can summarize Daniel chapters 8 in its simplest form. So Daniel chapters 8, 1 and 2, Daniel received this vision 12 years before the fall of Babylon. Since Babylon was about to be overthrown, the vision of this chapter begins with Medo Persia. This chapter is also a repeat of chapter 7 with more emphasis on the judgment scene, the cleansing of the sanctuary. Okay. And let's not forget the 2,300-day prophecy, which started, I think, 457 BC or 458 BC, all the way to 1844. Within that window of time, there are many significant dates that happened. The anointing of Christ, that is when he got baptized, and when he got crucified, when the gospel departed from the Jews to the Gentiles because they rejected Christ. And also the 1260-day prophecy of persecution is also featured in that timeline, okay? So Daniel chapters verses 3 to 4, verse 20 identifies this ram as Medo Persia. The 2 horns represent 2 parts of the empire, with the Persians, the younger of the 2 nations, becoming dominant over the Medes. We established that in Daniel chapter 7, because in that Daniel chapter 7, we see the bear limping on one side. It did not stood up in its correct posture. It was limping on one side. So the weaker side would have been the Persians. Okay. Daniel chapters 8, 5 through 8. I'm just giving you explanation here. You can go and read it. So Daniel verses 21, 22 identify the goat as Greece. The note of the horn between his eyes was Alexander the Great, who came from the west and defeated the armies of Persia. So that if you go back and you read Daniel 8, you'll see that the goat was charging at a very, very high speed. Okay. Symbolizing the swiftness of Alexander, who conquered mightily but died shortly afterwards. Alexander died without an heir at the height of his power. His generals fought each other until there was only 4 left, represented by the 4 horns. Okay, see also notes in Daniel chapter 7, 6. This also is expounded or begins to be expounded more, I think, in Daniel chapters 10 onwards. All right. The 2 animals used to represent Medo Persia and Greece is not wild animals of prey, but clean animals used in the sanctuary service, like I mentioned earlier. Okay. The next power to come into view is represented by a horn. The focus of this vision is how this power affects God's sanctuary, his people, and his work of saving souls from sin. Now remember again, the 2,300 days, right? In the middle of that, there was persecution that was going on. Now, not sure if you guys are aware of this. If you have not read Great Controversy, this is something that is worthwhile to know. So the 1260 years of prophecy was not necessarily focused on the Sabbath. When you read Great Controversy, the first 5 chapters, Rome had a lot of illegal rules where people had to pray to get their sins forgiven and whatnot. We know what Luther did when he nailed those theses to the door of Wittenberg and whatnot. You read it, there was nothing there mentioned about the Sabbath. However, these guys, they challenged Rome and some of the illegal stuff that they were doing. We have to make a note of this. It's not only the Sabbath that is attacked by Rome. There are other aspects of God's laws which are attacked. She claims that she can forgive sins and so on, right? And a lot more other stuff that she does. The list is very, very long. Okay. All right. So yes, the Bible was chained, and the Pope, the priest read to its audience in Latin, which they did not understand, right? Now, this ended in 1798, right? Between 1798 and 1844, how many years are that? I think it's close to 60, right? So remember that for 1260 years, there were no Bibles. So when the whole 1844 thing started and Ellen White came on the scene, God's truth had been what? Basically eradicated. So when you read early writings, you'll see stuff like the Sabbath conferences, where they will be meeting in groups in different parts of the United States, and they will be praying for God to give them, open up their minds so they could understand very critical parts of scripture that had been forgotten, right? Much thanks is owed to the prophet. And during those conferences, many times she would go into vision. And then the other members, not one, not two, they all would agree, not based on what she just told them, but based on what they were studying, it actually made sense. If I'm not mistaken, that's in the in early writings. It's called the Sabbath conferences. You can go and you can look at it. Okay. Daniel 8, 9 through 12. We know from Daniel 2 and 7 and from history that the power which followed Greece was Rome. In chapters 2 and 7, it was shown in 2 phases: pagan Rome and then divided Rome. We saw in chapter 7 that the religious power of papal Rome rose to dominate the divided empire. Remember, 3 horns were what? Destroyed, right? The Ostrogoths, the Varulian, there was another one. I don't remember. Anyone remember, they can chime in and let me know. Right? This vision represents
Something like
power.
Vagamos or something like that. Don't
Pardon?
know. I think the name is something like Vagamos or
Oh,
No, the,
I know what you're talking. Yeah, I know which one you're talking. I can never pronounce it either. It's hard to pronounce, right? So this vision represents power. The physical actions of pagan Rome against God's people are symbolic of papal persecution of God's people and their true worship. Okay, right. Now, Daniel chapters 8, 13 through 14. Day in Bible prophecy equals 1 literal year. So 2,300 days allotted for the events in this vision are 2,300 years. Go to Ezekiel chapters 4, 6, Numbers 14, 34. They can actually define that for us. This period cannot be 2,000 literal days, a little over 6 years, because this vision encompasses the Persian, Grecian, Roman, and papal powers. And because verse 17 and 19 state that the vision extend to the end of the time, and that is very, very critical. Okay, that was actually what happened. It extended all the way out until 1844, and it's still going on. Okay, so just to add a little bit about that. So when you go back to the typical, we had the Day of Atonement, right? 10 days before the Day of Atonement, what happened? The camp of Israel had to be what? Prepared, right? There was a horn that was blown. Now, Israel had different types of horn made from different materials. Some were made from coins that they took from Egypt when they were slaves. Some were made from horns and different stuff. So the camp was very big. It was over 2 million. So whenever a certain sound came from a certain horn, they knew what the occasion was. So 10 days before the Day of Atonement, a certain horn would be blown to tell the camp that it was time to get themselves ready for the Day of Atonement. Anyone that was found with sin during that time, they would be excommunicated from the camp. Okay. Now, let's get back to the anti-typical. A lot of folks don't know this. 10 years before 1844, the trumpet had also started to blow. And it was not only William Miller. There were other denominations as far as South Korea that were speaking about some event that was going to be happening in 1844. Now, as a church, we often say that 1844 was the great disappointment, but it was not a great disappointment. It was actually an appointment in my view, because God used the disappointment to bring an attention to his message. That was what God did. God deliberately allowed this to happen so that more attention could be drawn to his end-time message. Okay, or the judgment hour message, right? The angels does not give, last paragraph does not give the starting date in this chapter, but we know that it's sometime during the reign of Medo-Persia, 539 to 331 BC, which was the first kingdom in this prophecy. The exact starting date will be given in chapters 9. So I'm not going to delve into chapters 9, but we know what happened, right? Daniel was praying one of the longest prayers in the Bible, recorded in the Bible. And I think it's verses 21, while he was praying, that the angel came and actually brought down to him, because Daniel was perplexed for years, because the angel left him, high and dry in chapters 8. He did not he explained everything else, spoke about the animals, but when it comes to the 2,300 days, Daniel was baffled and he did not understand. So he had to wait for quite a few years. The angel came back, and the angel actually brought down what was actually happening, right? But Daniel was praying. If you look at the prayer, Daniel was actually praying, asking for forgiveness of sins. He, for God to cleanse him, was praying on behalf of his people, because Daniel somehow thought that some of what was happening had to do with the fact of, the sins of Israel, right? And let me just throw this in as a bonus. You guys might have known of Ezekiel. Daniel went to Babylon as a prophet. Ezekiel did not go as a prophet. He became a prophet in Israel, in Babylon. And one of the reasons for that, the main reason, was that after a certain amount of years in Babylon captivity, the Israelites wanted to go back. They were really fed up and they wanted to go back to Judah, where they were taken from by Nebuchadnezzar. So what God did, and that this is what the book of Ezekiel compromises. What God did, he took Ezekiel in vision, and he showed him that even though Nebuchadnezzar raided Judah 3 times, the people that were left behind were still steeped in idolatry. They had not learned their lesson. So when you read a lot of Ezekiel in the early part, you go to Daniel, you go to chapters 7 and 8, you'll see some of the stuff that they were doing, sun worship and different type of idolatry that was going on. So God showed it to Ezekiel to tell him, to tell the people of Babylon that, look, there's no point going back, because whatever reason you were taken here for, it's the problem still has not fixed. Okay, I just thought I'd add that in there for you. So the angel Gabriel is given a command. That's his 8 through 15, to instruct Daniel so he will understand the vision. However, Daniel faints before Gabriel can give him the starting date of the 2,300 days prophecy. You can go back to Ezra, read the book of Ezra and also its history, and you will understand to know what would happen in terms of, you know, when the wall would be rebuilt in troublesome times, because discrimination, again, the returning exiles were not accepted by their brothers and sisters who were left behind. So there was lots of issues that was going on when the walls had to be rebuilt. Okay, I think that's my thing for today.